Love
Well, I'm
you.
loving
my
the good
bedroom.
energy from you too.
Yeah.
I'll let you guys take the stage. I'll be back while you guys are wrapping towards the end.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks, girl. Hey, Rachel.
Hello.
It's
Hello.
us.
Hey, everyone. Taking over from the men.
Sorry?
I said we're taking over from the men.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's female power. Let's go.
Yep.
So awesome. I'm so excited to talk to you, especially of all people, because we go way back to a very different world in 2017. It's pre you moving to Switzerland. It's right before you took on this tiny role of overseeing all of global programmatic for Nestlé, this like tiny company that a few people have heard of. So I just want to hear a little bit about your transition from your previous roles, agency side, tech side, and how you took that into your role at Nestlé. And then what was your vision when you set out in 2017? And yeah, tell us.
Yeah, thanks, Kendra. And so you've definitely seen through this entire experience. So, I started this role in New York with just a Google Chromebook as I was awaiting both my visa to Switzerland and my Nestle computer, which for reasons of probably the ocean was delayed. So it was a good starting point. I had my it was really a Chromebook commercial, I would say. So from that Chromebook, I defined the framework for success. And because no one knew me yet, I was able to have really a designated few weeks to build the programmatic framework that became the skeleton for the operations that we've built over the past 3 years. So in Nestle eyes, I'm pretty new. Most people at Nestle work for Nestle for 20, 30, 40 years. It's truly a Fortune 100 company like that. But in these 3 years, we've done a lot. And so the vision was to build each component needed for the success and then weave them all together through the lens of audience and high operational standards.
Awesome. I love it. So we've got this like high level vision. We have a framework. We're waiting for our computer and our visas.
Yep. The visa was delayed too by 6 months. They have quotas in Switzerland. They can only accept so many Americans at once. True fact.
We're all trying to get there for the skiing and the chocolate. So
exactly.
So you had this framework established. So what came next after that? I assume you got your visas. You seem
the visa eventually came, the computer came, and then a lot of work came with both
awesome.
of those. So after we had the framework, what we did is we took a look at the current state of operations, both my manager Daria and I. And what we did first is we conducted a financial assessment. So we really took a look at where were the opportunities within the organization across programmatic. What were the gaps and how could we fill those gaps? So we conducted a lot of surveys. We really dove into these financial operations and outlined where some efficiencies lay and also where effectiveness lay. So once we outlined those opportunities where we thought that the biggest differences could be made, we then landed on the initial concept for our answer to in-housing, which was the Digital Media Center of Competencies. And from there, the initial concept had 16 opportunities.
Okay. Awesome.
Oh, sorry. So what we did with that is we then took a very crucial next step, and it's really great that honestly we had the sanctity of mind to do it. So we took these opportunities to all of our different zones. So much like many global teams, we have our global teams, we have our regional teams, and we have our local teams. And we have the sanctity of mind to take these 16 opportunities, which is way too many opportunities to address in the first, way too many. We were not going to.
And then roll it out casually across the global organization.
I would
totally decentralized. Yeah, of course.
There would need to be at least 3 of me and Daria each to have done that. So, we had this sanctity of mind. We brought it to the zones and we brought it to all of our largest media markets. And we got their perspectives and we said, what do you think of these opportunities? What do you think are the largest opportunities for the organization? And which ones would be a game changer for you. So we listened to their perspectives. We really, truly listened to their perspectives. And from there, we adjusted the concept. We adjusted the governance, and we took those 16 opportunities and pared it down to 6 opportunities. And that's where we started. Yeah. Totally different.
From
Totally
16 to
different
6. Thank you.
I'm doing my math right. I think that's about a 70% decrease. But that meant that we could be a lot more focused and really take them and do them end to end. And so where we started was with 6 competencies we thought were the most important. So audience utilization and audience optimization was one.
Okay.
Another was retail media, which, you know, has made a surge this year. You might have heard through a little thing called COVID.
Yes.
I don't know if you've been reading the newspapers recently.
Yeah,
but it's
I'm familiar. I don't know. I'm working from my bedroom.
Then we also addressed audience first advertising through dynamic creative optimization. We addressed transparency and accountability, so really digital media responsibility. We launched one on what we call supply and trading, but is effectively partnering throughout the programmatic supply chain, as well as ad operations, and those comprise the 6 that we started with. So from there, what we did is we had all of those markets that we talked to, which was 80% of our NNS. We had them determine which their priorities were. So out of these 6, they each committed to which of these were their priorities. And the majority of them committed to 3 or 4. And then all of the individuals that committed within those markets ultimately formed a working group for those 6 different competencies. From there, before launch, we had to recruit the people to fill these competencies. And the good thing here is this was pre-COVID. So this was back in 2019, right? And the good thing is
a simpler time.
A different world. Remember when we could see each other?
I know.
So the beauty here was that this was sort of designed to be virtual to start with. So these individuals that we were hiring to guide each of these competencies and to basically guide the working groups who were built from those local teams and the different global teams per one, were selected from anywhere in the world, just based on where the expertise were. And we partnered with our agencies to find these experts to guide these competencies. And the way of working was already virtual. And so this, I think, really, it helped us to already have a starting place when we were, you know, brought this whole new world in 2020.
I love that. Yeah, it's super interesting. I remember when we were first introduced to each of your I guess COCs, the Center of Competencies, and they were coming from different agencies, and they had such diverse backgrounds, and they came from different markets, and so they had that sort of global view, which was really great to see. But something that I wanted to touch back upon was how much you engaged with the local teams. And hearing about a very decentralized company like Nestlé, the global team engaging with local markets. Is that something that's common at Nestlé? Because I don't hear about that often across other global orgs.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So it wasn't time. At the time, there was not that way of working, and we built it through the Digital Media Center of Competencies. And you know, of course, the global and local teams talked and shared best in class practices, did different share outs of various pilots, but there wasn't this way of working where simultaneously there was the design of the strategy and the operations hand in hand with global and local teams. There wasn't the co-partnership in taking decisions together, ultimately connected by an expert who's able to guide towards the various different nuances, but be infused by the different business experience that our markets have, and that all of our individuals across markets are true leaders in. And so this ultimately turned into an interconnected infinity loop, even more than we ever anticipated. And it's being used as best-in-class ways of working across Nestlé, even to emulate for different initiatives. So different various zone business leads say, this is the way that all the global teams should interact with the local markets, having these working groups where the decisions are made together, but they're also made in an incredibly agile and fast way so that we can move quickly and move the company forward.
And get stuff done. It's not easy to do.
No. And, that's important.
Yeah,
at least to us New Yorkers,
Yeah. We're like, how can we be as efficient as possible and get things done? Like, we have a strategy, we have a vision, great. But then, like, what does that look like? And so, speaking of what does that look like, can you just give us an example? Because I feel like the Center of Competencies is awesome. We went from 16 to 6. Good on you. Focus, and it was all driven by local market contribution with global guidance, which I just love this this ground up strategy that you were able to implement in a very short amount of time, especially in Nestlé years. So I would just love if you could give us a practical example of how that came to life.
Yeah, so I think one of the easiest ones and one of the most fun ones to give the example through is dynamic creative optimization. And just to take a step back for one moment, for anyone who doesn't know what dynamic creative optimization is, what this is an automated technology that ultimately enables audience first advertising because it effectively builds it uses a decision tree to say if the consumer is interested, if the consumer is a mom, then they receive this creative for our infant nutrition brand. If the consumer is a dad, they receive this creative that's relevant to dads. If it's hot outside, then the scene is in the backyard. If it's cold outside, then the scene is inside. So it uses these different triggers to enable audience first advertising. So just to take a step back there in case anyone doesn't know what it is. So that was one of our competencies. We saw this as a way to transform and actually operationalize our audience first advertising vision because one of our digital media ambitions is to bring audience first advertising to life. Mm-hmm. So the first thing here was to have the working group. And then the working group comprised of over 15 of our largest markets, ultimately defined with the expert what was the North Star. And the North Star was to provide more relevant consumer experiences in our advertising. So we defined this North Star and everything came off of it. So they built out our standard operating procedures from planning to execution to measurement. They built out the way that measurement would take place in value realization, actually measuring the financial efficiencies of the production components and actually measuring the improved effectiveness based on better media performance. And in addition, they of course also worked together to conduct both an RFI and an RFP, a multi-pronged approach to determine who would be the right technology enabler to bring this, who could best bring to life the use cases where the aim was to bring audience first advertising to life. And the secondary aim was also to enable a way to automate our creative in more efficient means. Currently, the standard way of operating is that this is built out manually by individuals. So each and every ad size, each and every video length is built out manually. And the technology can also automate this. And it can also really help with global to local operations in the localization of a what we call a master asset to adjust it for Italy or to adjust it for France based on language, based on other cultural nuances. So they put this whole package together. They partnered on all the decisions and ultimately partnered as well on the technology selection for the company.
I love it. So this is DCO, which is fantastic, such a crucial part, and it's one of your 6. Did you end up rolling out this same framework across other vendors, other tech providers? How did you think about it for your overall ecosystem of partners?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we rolled out this the way that we step changed our operations to really connect the global and local teams, we rolled out for every RFP we've conducted in the past 3 years, but more so 2 years. So we rolled this out across DSP, across SSP, across ad verification, across DCO, as mentioned, and across also a customized reporting tool that we built. And here we built a multi-pronged RFP approach. This is what we've learned in the past couple of years works best. So first here we outline what is the business challenge, because technology should not be used just for the sake of technology. It shouldn't be used just because it's shiny and cool, although I love the shiny and cool technology. Huge fan. That's not a business use case. So first we outlined the business challenge, and we also outlined the use we're trying to do. So for example, with the DCO, we were trying to bring audience first advertising to life. That was the biggest ambition. Secondarily, another very impactful one, like I mentioned, is the bringing of content automation to life for global to localization, and also to adjust assets. And another sub one, helping to bring personalized recipe-driven advertising to life, for example, for our food brands. So there were several different use cases that we put forth, and for each RFP there is. So then from there, we built out the categorization of questions. So what are we going to focus on? And for example, in our DCO one, we focused on what platforms they could activate across. We focused on what use cases they could bring to life. We focused on how they pull in audiences. There were different categorization, and we aligned both the business challenges, the use cases, and the categorization with the working group and with the local decision makers who would ultimately be using this technology. Then we outlined who are the best solutions to this, and we start out with a lot of solutions, and throughout the multi-pronged we move to fewer and fewer through the different stages of the RFP. So we, from there, round out the questions and select the vendors for the RFP. And this is all in partnership with the individuals who have declared that this is a priority for them. So very frequently, this is on their annual plans within their individual operational master plans, within their market operational master plans. Our local teams set aside time approved by their managers, as this is such a critical initiative, and it's seen as a critical initiative to pair this all together through the org.
I love it. And so something I really wanted to highlight there of what you brought up. So there's like the standard RFI process of evaluating a technology, but there's something unique that Nestlé did that's not as common, which is the use cases. So how does a technology that I'm evaluating work for Nestlé specific problems? So whether that be trying to understand attribution of offline sales to online media, or trying to empower a holistic marketing strategy across multiple categories of portfolios. So I love that you not only took the evaluation of the shiny object, right, the technology itself, but then how do we apply that to Nestlé specifically, so that the local teams feel more involved instead of it being the sort of lofty global strategy. These local teams are involved in the process. They understand how the technology can work for them and reach their priorities. So I commend you for that. It's really not an easy thing to do, and you did it. So at this point, like, you've conducted a crazy amount of RFPs. You've sat through hours of presentations. I wish that so many of these people could have gone to Switzerland to present in person, but we're computers. But at this point, you must have learned a lot. I'd love to know what was like your biggest step change adjustment that you made to make sure that people were involved at the local level in this decision-making process.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we've made a bunch of step changes. So there's been a lot of learnings throughout these many RFPs, as you mentioned, and I'm devoted to the cause of never running an RFP again, and now operationalizing the use cases. But one of the step changes we made, and this is a very, very simple one. is we started producing a document that explained how our company is set up, what are the business needs, and whatever is relevant for that specific business challenge. What we found through some of the initial ones we did is there just wasn't this understanding from the tech providers, and fairly so. So the pitch often was quite different. So the pitches would be different from different providers, and they were really difficult to compare. And so by just preparing a simple two-pager about what you're really trying to accomplish, preparing a proper briefing on top of the actual RFP and the actual questions, and really explaining the company's setup and who are taking the decisions and why is the decision being taken, it is a game changer. So it's totally an extra time commitment, and I know we're all swamped, but it's really worth it for the end results.
Yeah, because otherwise you have a bunch of salespeople trying to sell you on their thing, right? As opposed to, why is this going to help Nestle?
Yeah, and you know, it's only fair to them, and it's good for your time as the brand, and it's good for the tech partners' time, and it makes so much better results end to end.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because there's so many of these pitches where there's like mind reading assumed. It's like, well, you didn't show me what I wanted to see, even though I didn't tell you what I wanted to see.
Sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's great. I love the responsibility that you took for giving the vendors what they needed to present and set them up for success. You don't want to sit through a bunch of failures. You want to have your choice of, like, make the choice hard. Like that's pretty cool. So what other make it what?
Comparable between providers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's think about like I love how much you've been giving us sort of insight into how the sausage is made, which isn't very common. Like normally a setup like this, we would just keep everything really high level and you wouldn't get into the actual execution. But I think the people on the line, I'm assuming this is really helpful because you're giving strategy advice. What other advice would you give to a large global decentralized company looking to maybe roll out something similar and gain a closer relationship with their tech providers and own those contracts themselves?
Yeah, so beyond the use cases, which I'll go into a bit later, but more tactically, very simple things, very simple tips that I would recommend is, first of all, the way that you score the RFP is incredibly important. So across our stream, we really believe in being transparent with the providers, and we want them to understand how they're being scored. So we share the scorecard in full transparency with each of the tech providers in the RFP. This is something that we've started to do. We don't share it too early in the presentation and frame it all around the scorecard, but we share it before so it's fully transparent and there's no surprises after the fact. And then after the fact, once the RFP is closed, we walk through with each provider exactly how they were scored and how they compared to their peers. How they compared to their peers. We have to be very careful with NDA information. We don't give anything away, but we at least talk to them about their product and why it wouldn't work for our company for whatever reason. So some other simple learnings on the scorecard is automate it. Automate the scorecard. So this is the best advice I can give you. So it really helps on the back end of aggregating the scores across different individuals and knowing how each entity scores. It's also great for instant gratification, and it really pulls the process together to be a lot more speedy. The other thing I'd say about the scorecard is make it concise. So we've learned this over the different RFPs too. The more concise you make it, the better, because the people who are scoring take it a lot more seriously the fewer questions that there are. So ask the most important questions and ask questions that you can't misconstrue in different ways. They're factual based questions based on how you briefed and what the business challenges are. So we found that the more concise scorecards actually also helps to lessen the delta across the scoring, and it makes a huge impact.
Yeah, and then you also have you have the buy-in from the teams because you've been engaging them since the very beginning. So by the time they're filling out the scorecards, they know about this process. They're not just like given a scorecard out of nowhere.
Right.
So speaking again of local, just because I love this topic, because especially with a global team like taking the local activation so seriously, how do you account for local nuances in a global RFI/RFP? Like that's not easy to do. How'd you do it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So first of all, it starts at the top. We make sure that we're aligned on the business objective. We make sure that we're aligned on what is the purpose of this technology and how will it be used? What is the need for the RFP? And how will we be scoring? What matters? From there, everything trickles down from that. So one of the simple step changes we've made is to allow people to wear different hats, and it can be incredibly simple. So for example, in our DSP RFP, we asked the 10 different markets who were engaged in this pitch, who was the best fit DSP for the organization, who was the best fit for advanced markets, and who was the best fit, or like score how they're a fit for advanced markets, score how they're a fit for emerging markets, and score how they're a best fit for the organization, as well as score how they're a best fit for you. And so that way, by asking a question to them saying, are they a fit for your market? Are they a fit for advanced markets? Are they a fit for emerging markets? This allows them to wear different hats. We've learned over the different RFPs that even if you ask people to wear different hats, it's unfair to them unless you ask the right questions that allows them to wear different hats, because their belief for their market versus their belief for advanced markets or emerging markets could be totally different answers. It's a crazy simple step change.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you, I'm just going to move on a little bit here just as we're cognizant of time, but what would you say is your biggest differentiator in the whole RFP process? So we've talked through a lot of things that are unique to Nestlé versus more standard, but what would you say, Rachel, throughout this process, we're 2 years into these evaluations, number one differentiator?
So the number one differentiator, I think, are the use cases. Think about what are the business challenges you want this technology to fill. So for the DSP RFP, it was enabling the convergence of media planning, buying, and measurement. That was one of the use cases. The second use case was the connection to brand and business results. And these use cases really brought to life actual capabilities of the technology. It makes the providers think about how can their technology solve a business problem, and this allows you as an advertiser to figure out, is it the right fit for your company? Because I'm a strong believer that there's different fits for different companies. It's not the same solution for everyone.
Awesome. And so what would you say, based on that being the number one differentiator, what's the best example of that working? In maybe you've already made the selection post use cases. What's the best example of it working?
So I'd say the best example here is it was how we decided to change ad verification providers. So again, here we had at least 10 markets engaged in this decision. And because all of our largest markets were engaged throughout every component of the process, when we took the decision to change the entire technology over, quite quickly, I might add, and during COVID time, to the whole company in one fell swoop, when the decision had to be made when the decision had to be approved across all zones and markets due to the way of how we fund this technology, the alignment resulted in such simplified business approvals that other initiatives just didn't have the same immediate alignment because we did it the right way for the whole org, because we could genuinely say, and the people on the calls could say, this is the right move. The decision makers could say, this is the right move. It was there, and we were able to seamlessly shift over.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's not easy as a global organization with separate P&Ls across different markets and opcos to say, hey, you should do this, because those individual markets are going to say, well, I'm autonomous and I'm not doing that. But because you engage them from the beginning, that process and the rollout of a new partner, it truly was global as opposed to globally recommended, right? So it's very cool to see the recommendations turn into actual execution and adoption. So kudos to you for getting that buy-in and understanding how to navigate just a tiny little company called Nestlé. So shifting gears a bit, this was so helpful. I appreciate how transparent you're being and how much you're sharing with the wider group, because I firmly believe, as do so many of my colleagues, that this rising tide raises all ships. Right. So you sharing this with us is crazy helpful, and we really appreciate it. So it's an example of this working, right? I love seeing it. So I guess I want to learn more about how did you adjust in the middle of doing multiple evaluations across multiple vendors globally. Something happened in late March that required us to adjust a bit. So how did you adjust and also stay on the same timelines? And were you able to stay on those same timelines given the impact of COVID, both on our business and then also on the way that we do work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we ended up conducting multiple RFPs remotely, but the one that we conducted fully remotely was the DSP RFP. So luckily, because of how we set up the DCOC, we already had some experience engaging with markets while working remote and working virtually across every time zone in the world. However, we had to, previously we had conducted RFPs and we paired them on top of big meetings. So we would have biannual meetings and we would put the RFP next to that so people would be in person. Here we had to fully shift it to running remote. So instead of conducting it over 2 days, we conducted it over 2 weeks, for example, with the DSP RFP. And to account for time zones and honestly everyone's sanity in not having too many hours in one RFP while attempting to parent and teach and all these other things that everyone has to navigate these days, we selected the time zones that were best for most everyone. It wasn't best for everyone, but it was best for the majority of the people. And people were quite patient with us, dialing in a bit early, but not too early, staying on a bit late, but not too late. And, we ensured that communication was at its tip top, that we were constantly communicating, and that we were quite structured in the way that this was set up.
I love it. And it's great to hear how quickly you're able to pivot, how flexible everyone was, and then also just how understanding and empathetic the leads were in understanding that we can't make people work 24 hours a day. There's a whole new set of variables that we're dealing with work from home and having children. So I really respect it, and I think it's fantastic that's how you approached it. So do you think some of the updates that you've made to your overall communication strategy will stick once offices reopen, or do you see things going back to the way they were?
I do think some of it will stick. I think our larger communications will stick as well, because individuals will expect more real-time engagement in different social platforms. But on top of what we're saying, I actually do think that we should continue to run virtual RFPs. I think it's a much better way to include more people that genuinely want to be engaged. And I think that, doing it while individuals are traveling is difficult, because still not everyone can be there. And when you put some people physical and some people virtual, it makes a pretty bad experience for everyone on the line who are equally as important just because they couldn't be there. I also think that we'll continue to make them more and more collaborative as additional technologies come out that enable new types of collaboration.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of the big challenges in the beginning of COVID was, are people engaged? Are they listening? I have no idea. I'm presenting to the ether.
Sure.
So getting people to be involved is so important. And I can't wait to see as more technologies emerge coming out of this crisis. It's going to be very interesting to see how the ways of working change. So I guess just to wrap us up, like, you've done a few things in 3 years, Ms. Mervis.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's time I retire. No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding. No, so the
getting out
next
there.
step, I'm just gonna move to Greece,
I just think you need to take a nap. That's it's a really long nap. But tell us all, like, what's next? You've accomplished a lot. I just want to know, like, what's next for you? What's next for Nestle? Give us a
yeah, so
tease.
So the next step here is really just operationalizing these use cases. So we have these great use cases that we've selected incredible technology providers. Now we have to take those use cases, bring it to life, and pair it all together. We don't want each of these technologies to be in silo. We want them to be very connected. And we need to bring all of this upskilling and new ways of working to life to have the total end-to-end vision come to life in true operationalization. And that sounds simple, but I'm sure it won't be. I'm sure it'll be quite exciting over the next 18 months.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if anyone can do it, I think that you can definitely lead this team into making that a reality. So, oh, this was so cool. I know that we do have some time for questions and answers. I believe that Pearl is going to be hopping back in to help with that moderating. Not seeing anything on the chat. Oh, Pearl, hi. She's like, I've been here the entire time. In addition to however many
Invisibly
people.
watching.
Yeah.
Welcome back, we missed you.
So, I'm trying to see if I can pull up these. I can't find the questions, but one question I have for you is, like, what are you looking forward to in 2021? Do you have any exciting things coming out? Just give us a little preview.
Yeah, so 2021, we're really going to be operationalizing the vision for DSP, ad verification, and DCO. So we're really going to be operationalizing our audience first vision, both above market and within market, as well as integrating DCO into various different components that will everyone stay tuned for. That's not that we're not sharing out yet. Apologies. We can share a lot, but not that yet. Additionally, we'll be rolling out our ad verification, our new provider, to really raise our media quality, and we'll start to do a lot there, even having a new currency for how we buy and measure our media, all reliant on this ad verification provider, and ultimately connecting it into the DSPs so that this new currency can also become a buying algorithm as well as an optimization algorithm. And all of these we intend on linking together.
Very exciting. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Rachel and Kendra. I mean, Rachel, our community is mostly brand marketers, so they love hearing all about the nerdy programmatic and media stuff. So we hope to have you back again soon. Alrighty. Well, now we're thrilled to introduce our last session of the day. We have Kelly Lane from JAXA and